May 22nd, 1960, 3:11 p.m. The ground beneath southern Chile doesn't shake, it liquefies. Buildings don't collapse, they vaporize into clouds of dust. The Pacific Ocean vanishes from the coastline, then returns as a wall of water that will cross 10,000 kilometers and kill people who don't even know Chile exists. Magnitude 9.5, the most powerful earthquake ever recorded. A number so extreme that seismologists thought their instruments were broken. But the earthquake was only the beginning. What followed was a cascade of catastrophes that would unfold over 60 days, each threatening to finish what the first disaster started. The day before the apocalypse, Chile was already on its knees. May 21st, 6:02 a.m. A magnitude 8.1 earthquake struck Concepción. 4 minutes of shaking. 4 minutes that killed over 100 people. Families crawled from collapsed homes and camped in the streets, too terrified to sleep under roofs. Seismologists noticed something disturbing. The aftershocks weren't dying down. They were migrating southward in a deliberate pattern, like dominoes being set up by an invisible hand. Their instruments were screaming warnings in a language nobody could translate. Deep beneath the Pacific, 50 kilometers offshore, the Nazca Plate had been grinding under the South American plate for millennia. Pressure building. A spring compressed beneath its breaking point. 33 hours after Concepción, that spring was about to snap. And when it did, it would shift the Earth's axis and send shockwaves that would register on every continent. But the people of Valdivia didn't know that. They thought the worst was over. They were catastrophically wrong. Saturday afternoon, the sun hangs bright over Valdivia. Families gather for lunch in homes with cracked walls. Children kick a football between piles of bricks. The market buzzes with vendors. There's a brittleness to every conversation. People laughing too loud at jokes that aren't funny, avoiding eye contact when discussing the dead. The Cascade River flows peacefully. Fishermen check their nets. Life continues because bills don't stop and children don't stop being hungry. But 50 kilometers offshore, 2 continental plates are locked in the final seconds of a battle that's raged for thousands of years. At 3:11 p.m., the losing side surrenders. The sound comes first. A deep bass rumble from below, a frequency you don't hear so much as feel in your bones, in the primitive part of your brain that recognizes predators. Then the ground moves and reality fractures. The earth transforms into liquid. Solid ground undulates in 10-meter waves like a storm-tossed sea. People are thrown to their knees, then their stomachs. Those who try to run discover that stable ground no longer exists. They crawl instead, grabbing at lampposts, at walls, only to watch those anchors themselves start swaying. Walls split with cracks like rifle shots. Thousands of them. Roofs fold inward. Adobe homes that survived centuries dissolve into powder in seconds. Even modern buildings, concrete and steel, begin twisting beyond tolerance. The noise is apocalyptic. Metal screaming, glass exploding from thousands of windows, thousands of structures groaning. And underneath it all, that impossible bass rumble continues. 10 seconds, 20, 30. The shaking doesn't stop. 1 minute becomes 2, 2 becomes 5, 5 becomes an eternity. Deep below, 1,000 kilometers of plate boundary fails. The ocean floor drops 20 meters, displacing billions of tons of water. The energy equals 2,000 megatons of TNT, 1,400 times more powerful than Hiroshima. In Japan, seismologists watch their instruments go haywire. In Hawaii, needles jump off recording paper. The entire planet rings like a bell. In downtown Valdivia, the Grand Hotel collapses floor by floor in 30 seconds. The cathedral's bell tower topples through the nave. The market square becomes a crater of dust. People are buried alive everywhere. Then, after 10 minutes that felt like 10 hours, the shaking stops. Dust hangs so thick you can barely see 10 meters. Survivors crawl from wreckage covered in blood and shock. Then someone near the Cascade River shouts something that makes blood run cold. The river is disappearing. The water drops several meters in minutes, exposing mud and rocks. Fish flop on the riverbed. Boats rest sideways in mud. Fishermen who understand what this means start running, screaming, "Tsunami!" Most people don't understand. They stand at the riverbank staring at a river with no water, trying to make sense of something that makes no sense. They're still standing there when the water comes back. A 4-meter wall of water surges through downtown with a sound of continuous thunder. The earthquake displaced so much water that the river reversed course, flowing backward, running uphill. Homes that survived the shaking are swept away in seconds. Cars tumble end over end. People clinging to debris are pulled under and drowned. Valdivia, already devastated by 10 minutes of shaking, now drowns under a flood from every direction. But this is still not the worst. 80 kilometers south, Puerto Montt faces the open Pacific. The port city has just endured the same earthquake, the same collapse, the same death. Now, in the terrible silence after the shaking stops, something stranger begins. The Pacific Ocean starts backing away from the coast. Not slowly, fast. The waterline recedes by hundreds of meters, exposing the harbor bottom, sand, rocks, kelp, the twisted skeletons of sunken boats. The sight is so bizarre that people actually walk onto the exposed seabed. Children run onto the wet sand, laughing, scooping up stranded fish. Parents call out, but not urgently, not understanding they're watching a countdown to their own deaths. Some grab buckets and start collecting fish, already thinking about dinner tomorrow. Then, someone with binoculars sees it. A dark line on the horizon, growing, approaching with impossible speed. The first tsunami wave is 25 meters tall, higher than a 7-story building, traveling at jetliner speed, headed directly toward thousands of people standing on the exposed seabed with buckets full of fish. The wave hits like divine retribution. Entire neighborhoods cease to exist in 3 seconds, not damaged, erased. Homes are obliterated so completely that foundations vanish. Boats weighing tons are hurled hundreds of meters inland, smashing through buildings. When the first wave recedes, it drags everything with it. Bodies, debris, cars, houses reduced to kindling. Streets that existed for 400 years are simply gone, replaced by flat mud where no grid pattern is visible. And this is just wave 1. Tsunamis come in sets. The second and third waves are still forming in the deep Pacific, gathering strength. 150 kilometers offshore, Isla Mocha has no way of knowing what's coming. The island's 1,200 residents felt the earthquake but have no context for understanding it. No radio, no telephone, just fishing boats for the weekly supply run. Some fishermen notice the ocean behaving strangely. Years of experience tell them something is wrong. They start rowing back faster, driven by instinct they can't articulate. But they're not rowing fast enough. The tsunami that hit Isla Mocha is 30 meters tall. It washes over the entire island like a hand wiping away a sandcastle. 600 people die in 30 seconds. Half the population. The other half clings to trees, to high ground, to life itself. When survivors look around, their island has become a graveyard. Entire families erased. Many will never return, will take the first rescue boat to the mainland and never look back. Back in Valdivia, 3 tsunami waves have struck, but the earthquake isn't finished. On the Andes slopes, 3 massive landslides dam the outlet of Rinehue Lake. Within hours, the lake begins rising. Engineers arrive and realize they're looking at a geological time bomb. If that dam fails, it will release a flood wave that makes the tsunami look insignificant, a wall of water traveling at highway speed directly toward Valdivia. Every person who survived the earthquake and tsunami will die. They have 60 days to prevent the 4th catastrophe. Meanwhile, the tsunami is still traveling, still killing. 15 hours later, Hawaii. Despite warnings, 61 people die in Hilo when 10-meter waves flatten blocks. 22 hours later, Japan. 142 dead in fishing villages. The Philippines, California, Australia, New Zealand, every Pacific nation reports deaths. This isn't just Chile's disaster. It's planetary. When the water finally stops, the scope becomes visible. Entire towns that existed for 400 years no longer exist. Valdivia has 40% of buildings destroyed. Puerto Montt has neighborhoods reduced to flat mud. 2 million people, 20% of Chile's population affected. 1 in 5 Chileans. Official death toll, 1,655. But in remote villages, entire communities disappeared without trace. The true toll is likely over 3,000. 5,700 injured. 2 million homeless. $550 million in damages. And Rinehue Lake is still rising. For 60 days, Chile holds its breath. Workers labor around the clock, digging drainage channels by hand, using explosives, racing against rising water. Every night, people in Valdivia go to sleep, wondering if they'll wake to a wall of water. Every morning, they wake, grateful, but terrified it won't last. If the workers fail, 100,000 people will die in a flood worse than the tsunami. On July 26th, the water level finally stabilizes. The drainage channels work. The crisis is averted with barely any margin for error. Workers collapse in exhaustion and relief. They just prevented the fourth catastrophe. They just saved 100,000 lives. But even though the immediate crisis is over, the trauma continues for years. Aftershocks persist for months, hundreds of them, some magnitude 7 or higher. Major disasters anywhere else, merely aftershocks here. Each one sends survivors diving for cover. Each one brings back that afternoon when the earth turned liquid. Chile's southern economy collapses completely. Fields flooded, roads impassable, bridges gone. The government nearly falls apart, but Chile doesn't break. The nation bends, it cracks, but it holds together through refusal to surrender. Within months, reconstruction begins. Not just rebuilding, but reimagining how humans should build in earthquake zones. Engineers study collapsed buildings with forensic intensity. Why did some fail while others stood? They discover that traditional construction is a death trap. Thick adobe walls shatter, rigid frames snap, but flexible steel frames can ride out the waves. Reinforced foundations stay anchored. New building codes are written, among the strictest in the world. Every structure must be designed for earthquakes. Flexibility over rigidity, human safety over construction costs. The disaster becomes the world's largest laboratory for seismology. Scientists map the Nazca Plate with unprecedented precision. They understand megathrust earthquakes in ways that were impossible before. This knowledge will save thousands of lives in future earthquakes worldwide. Chile leads the effort to establish specific tsunami warning systems. The technology is primitive. No satellites, no computer modeling, just sensors and telephones and human judgment. But it's infinitely better than nothing. By the early 70s, Valdivia thrives again, rebuilt with earthquake-resistant buildings, modern infrastructure, improved preparedness. The scars remain, empty lots, memorials, plaques, but life returns. Children play in streets. Markets fill with vendors. Families gather for festivals. The collective trauma fades into memory, though it never completely disappears. The 1960 Great Chilean Earthquake took everything it could from a nation. 1,655 lives officially, likely over 3,000 in reality. Entire cities erased. An economy shattered. The planet itself permanently altered. Axis shifted. Rotation changed, continental shape deformed. Seismologists discovered that extreme earthquakes can literally reshape continents, that the solid ground we build on is far less permanent than we believe, that Earth occasionally reminds us we're just passengers on its surface. But the earthquake couldn't destroy what mattered most. It couldn't break the essential human capacity for courage and sacrifice. The ground can liquefy, buildings can collapse, the ocean can rise like a wall, entire cities can be erased. But the human capacity to reach for each other when everything falls apart, that survives every disaster nature throws at us. The earthquake taught seismologists about megathrust faults and tsunami propagation. That knowledge saved lives in Japan's 2011 earthquake, Indonesia's 2004 tsunami, Chile's 2010 earthquake. But it taught everyone else something more important. The measure of humanity isn't how well we do when life is easy, but who we choose to be when the ground turns to liquid and death surrounds us. Every earthquake eventually stops. The shaking always ends. The ground always settles. The aftershocks diminish until the earth is still again. But the way we reach for each other in the rubble, that doesn't stop. The way we hold each other when everything falls apart, that doesn't diminish. The way we choose to stay when leaving would be safer, that doesn't fade. That's forever. That's what it means to be human.